Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
In this video, we were going to be removing and replacing the power steering pressure hose in a 2010 GMC Acadia. This is a very common problem for these vehicles. If you need any parts for your vehicle, click the link in the description and head over to 1aauto.com. So we're checking for our leak because we know our power steering system has a lack of fluid. We notice some staining here, and over in this area it's wet. But before we say it's a power steering rack, we gotta look higher and see. And as you can see up here, our power steering line is actually the culprit. It's leaking right in this area right here. Actually, you can see the fluid coming out when I push on that grommet right there. So we're gonna go ahead and replace that. Pop the hood, and grab this lever, pull up. To open the hood, the safety's right here. Pull it to the right. Remove this cover. We need to pull the oil fill off and grab the cover, pull up on the front, and grab it back here, pull up on the back. There's a bunch of retainers that hold it down. Put the cap back on so no debris goes into the oil. I'm gonna check the power steering fluid. Wipe it off first. Stick it back in. As you can see, there's no power steering fluid on the dipstick. And the power steering fluid should be in between those two marks. To start pulling this line off, we're gonna start with a 10mm ratchet wrench. You can use a regular wrench, but it would be a little more tricky. There's a bracket that holds these two lines on, and it goes into the front of the motor. And what we need to do is take that 10mm bolt out. Once you get it loose a little bit, you should be able to do it with your fingers. And there's that bolt. We're gonna remove this tie wrap that's locked into the bracket. I can never get it to come free without breaking, so we're just gonna cut it, and then we're gonna re-wire tie it afterwards. So we're gonna use some diagonal cutters and just cut it. Pull the tire off. We're gonna use a 22mm socket. You could also use a 7/8 and a breaker bar. Just break the lug nuts free. This is the passenger side front tire. Just make sure these are all loose. Just take the socket and pull off the lug nuts one at a time. Pull the last lug nut off. Pull the tire down. We're gonna take this 10mm bolt out. That goes to the intake tube for the power steering pump. We're gonna use a 10mm socket and a ratchet. The reason we are removing this line is so that we can get a wrench on this nut to be able to remove the pressure hose. And I can just pull it off by hand. Shouldn't be too tight once you crack it free. Some of the fluid is gonna come out. I wanna keep from getting the fluid into the frame area. So I made a little shield. I cut a little plastic out of a bottle. What we're going to do is stick this under here, hold that down, and I'm gonna pull off this hose, and some fluid's gonna come out. I'm gonna have it go into a drain bucket. Let that drain out for a little bit. I'm gonna pull this drain away because it's just dripping. I'm gonna put a rag underneath it, or a paper towel, because it's just dripping. Pull that out. Put that aside. On this line, there's an O-ring. I'm gonna take a 90-degree pick. I'm gonna take that O-ring off so it doesn't get lost, because we're gonna reuse it. Just go under without stabbing it. We'll pull it off and we'll set it aside. So we're gonna take and use a 16mm wrench on this flare nut that goes into the power steering pump. This is the pressure line that we're replacing. We're gonna loosen it up. It is tight to get in here, but with a little bit of patience, you can do it. Once I get it loose, I'm actually taking a stubby 17mm wrench and loosening it up with that, because it makes it easier to get on, and it's loose enough that it's not going to strip it or anything. All right, and that's out. You want to make sure when we pulled that off that the O-ring came with it and it's not stuck in the pump. All right. We're going to take this 10mm bolt off this bracket right here. Here's a 10mm socket and a ratchet. Just loose, pull it out by hand. I'm going to take this bracket, we're going to bend up the top half just a little bit, just to open it up. And we're going to take this bolt out up top here. We're going to use a deeper 10mm socket in the ratchet so that we can get in there. And this is a caged bolt, so when you take the bolt out, it's going to stay with the bracket. Make sure we have a drain bucket on this side as well, because some fluid's going to come out once we pull it off. Pull that out. Pull it out of the bracket, and then we're going to pull it back here to let it drain. Just like that. Leave that for a little bit. Next we're going to take this bracket off. We need to take that nut out right there. So we're going to use a 10mm socket and a long extension and a ratchet. Get the nut. And I can pull the bracket off the stud. Put it back. Okay, so now we're going to take the hose. We're going to move the feed hose to the side a little bit. Grab the bracket, and then we're gonna pull it up on this side. Now our new hose doesn't come with this bracket, so we're gonna have to transfer it over. So here's our new hose. I'm just gonna mark with a felt tip pen where that bracket's gonna go. Put that aside. I'm gonna take this bracket off. This is that wire tie I was telling you about earlier. I'm just gonna take this off here, throw that away. There's two tabs right here. I'm gonna take some diagonal cutters and bend them out. Trying not to cut the little tabs, just bend them. Use a straight tip screwdriver, pry up on the bracket. Get it off. I'll install it on the new one. Make sure you're holding the line the same direction that you pulled it off. You don't want to put it on backwards. Pinch it closed. Use some channel lock pliers to squeeze it in. As I'm using the needle nose to hold it tight. we're gonna take our old line and we're gonna fish it straight down where the other side is. Push it down there. And we'll grab it from underneath. All right, we're gonna pull this line down now, straight through. And there we go. So we're gonna have to transfer this bracket over as well. So we're gonna line the old line up with the new line. Looks like it's right about there. So we'll just mark that with a felt tip marker. We're gonna use some needle nose and a straight screwdriver. Pull this out. Pry it up a little bit. Pull this off of here. Pull this off. I'm gonna wipe it down with a rag first. Put it on right here. Use our needle nose pliers. Squeeze this. Bend that down a little bit so it lines up with the hole. Once I'm through the hole, I can bend it up. Take another pair of needle nose pliers and bend it back. And there we go. And it's on. Right, so these seals come with the kit for this line. So we're gonna take these seals off and install them just like the old ones. Like that. This one's gonna go over here first. So now these seals, the new green seal is actually the smaller seal, so that's gonna go on the other end. The black seal is gonna go on this end with this, just like that. The old one was green, the new one's black. And then the other O-ring is gonna go on this end. Just like that. We're gonna have to transfer over the bolt, so we're gonna take this cage off of here. Just try to pry it up with the needle nose. There we go. And we broke it. Pull it aside. We're not gonna reuse it, but we are gonna reuse the bolt. Okay, now that our line is all set, we're gonna feed this through. We'll take this part, feed this through the backside first, where the old one went. Straight through there. And then the front is gonna go over here. Go this way. We're gonna take the bracket. We're gonna feed the bracket underneath this intake hose for the power steering, and then underneath that wiring harness over here. We're gonna pull this line down here to get it lined up. I'm not gonna install it yet. We just want it close to where it's supposed to go. We're gonna start threading in this bottom flare nut for the pressure line. It's gonna be kind of hard to get it in. It has to be lined up with the pump perfect. So once you feel some threads, don't put a wrench on it right away. Just make sure you can do it by hand. If you can't do it by hand and you put a wrench on it, you may strip the threads. We're gonna install this 10mm bolt back in the bracket. Now that the flare nut is at least threaded in to the pump, you want to do this before you tighten it up. Once you tighten up the line down below, it's going to be harder to move it if you have to adjust where the bracket's going to line up. So we'll install this now into the bracket. hard to see. You have to do this by feel pretty much. We can tighten this down with our ratchet wrench. Here we go. And then we can snug that down. Now we're gonna install this cable tie to attach this hose to the other hose. Wrap it around. And we're gonna take some diagonals cutters and just cut the rest of the cable tie off. Just like that. I'm gonna start snugging this up with my 17 millimeter stubby. Remember, it's not really a 17, but it's just easier to get it at the 17, just till you get it snug, and then you go back to the 16 millimeter wrench. All right, so it's starting to get snug. I'm gonna grab my 16 millimeter wrench, tighten it up. There's no way you're gonna get a torque wrench in here, so just do the best you can. Next, we're gonna take the O-ring that we took off earlier. I'm gonna reinstall it on this 90-degree bend. Get that installed, be careful and make sure you get it lined up in the hole. Push it down on that bracket. And then we're gonna take our 10 millimeter bolt and we're gonna put it in to that 90 degree. I'll use our 10 millimeter socket and our ratchet. I'll snug it up. That's good. All right, next we're gonna align this bracket up top here. Just put that on the stud. Take our 10 millimeter nut, stick that on the stud. And we'll take our 10 millimeter socket and extension, tighten that down. We're just gonna install this for a second right here. Put that in, get it close. Just make sure that's on there, because we're gonna put fluid in up top before we completely install that. We're gonna take a transmission funnel. I'm gonna stick it in the reservoir for the power steering. You're gonna push it down. You're gonna want the tranny funnel to stick straight up and down, just like that. Put a couple rags around here in case fluid leaks out. For this vehicle, General Motors actually recommends that you use transmission fluid instead of power steering fluid. The system takes Dex 6 transmission fluid. And we're going to fill this up. Not quite to the tippy top, but pretty high. Right to about there. And then we're going to put the vehicle back up in the air and bleed some of the air out. Okay, so while the fluid's in the funnel up top, we're gonna pull this line off of here. I'm gonna keep my finger on the steering rack and I'm gonna let the fluid drain out of this line here. Now that's sending fluid down from the reservoir through the pump and then pushing the air out of this line. And we sit right here. Oh, see? Starting to run out. We'll let it go for another minute. I still have my finger on the hole for the where this line would go in on the steering rack, just plugging it off. So the fluid is just coming out through the power steering pump and through this line right now. Okay, that's pretty good. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put my finger on this end of the line, and then I'm gonna pull my finger off the rack. And now the rack is gonna bleed. So fluid's coming out of the rack right now. On that side. And that's bleeding the air out of that side. That's pretty good. So now I'm going to put them together. And that's all set. Make sure this bracket is lined up here. We'll take our 10mm bolt. This bolt is going to be the longer bolt. And then stick that in. Now we're going to bend this bracket back down. Make sure before we tighten this bolt up here to make sure we can get this bolt in. Then we can tighten this down and tighten this bolt down. Now we're going to use some brake parts cleaner and clean this area up over here, from over here, and then clean this area up over here. We're going to reinstall our tire. Install the lug nuts. So I'm going to use a torque wrench and a 22mm socket. I'm going to torque these to 140 foot-pounds. So we're going to torque this down in a star pattern so that the wheel gets tightened down properly so it's not warped or out of alignment. So there's still fluid in here, so I'm going to pop this out quickly and put my hand on the bottom to catch the fluid. So just twist it a little bit. There we go. And the fluid's up to the top. I am going to have to suck some of that out. So I'm going to suck some of the fluid out with this pump. Stick this in here. Okay, the level's a little on the high side, which is good. We're gonna leave the cap off. We're gonna start the car a couple times and then recheck it. Okay, so I'm gonna start the car a couple times, not touching the steering wheel. This steering system's a little bit different than most conventional steering systems. So if I just start it and then shut it off, I'm gonna do that 3 times. I'm going to recheck the fluid. It went down a little bit, so we're going to top it off before we start it and let it run. Okay, it's right up at the top, and that's where we want it right now for when we're going to let it run for a little bit. We'll leave the cap off for now while we let it run. All right, we're going to start it up. We're going to let it run for about 5 minutes like that. So after the engine's been running for about 5 minutes, then we're going to get in it with the wheels off the ground a little bit and turn the wheels back and forth. Not staying on the stop for too long, just hitting the end and then coming back. And we'll do that a couple times. Maybe about 5 to 10 times total. And then we're going to leave the steering wheel straight. And then we'll shut it off. So at this point, we're going to check our fluid level. I'm just going to top it off just a little bit. I just want it closer to the max line. At this point, you would take the car for a ride, drive it for about 5 to 10 minutes, come back and you would check the fluid level again and adjust accordingly. All right, so we'll put the oil cap off, put the engine cover back on, push it down, put the fill cap back on. All right, so the next step, we're gonna need to take this line off. But when we take this line off, we're gonna need to put a plug right there. So I'm gonna show you a little trick I did. Take a little piece of hose and then take a bolt. I'm gonna put the bolt in the other end. And then when I slip that line off, I can stick this right on the end and that'll keep the fluid in. So I'm gonna put some rags underneath here because some fluid's gonna come out. And I'm gonna take some pliers and take this lock ring off. I get close to the end, grab my plug in my other hand so that I can do this quickly. So I don't lose too much fluid. There we go, just like that. Just a little bit, it's just got to keep the fluid in there. So I use some locking needle nose pliers to open up that clamp, and then I'm going to use some hose and I'm going to go from the inside here. It's going to take a little bit of effort, but it will go in there. We want to try to get a good amount in because we don't want this hose popping off when the engine's running. And that seems good. Now I'm going to pull the locking pliers off, which will secure it a little better. Next we're going to install a transmission style funnel and just lock it in there. A nice skinny funnel. I'm going to use a bottle and we're going to put the hose into the bottle. So that's where the old fluid's going to go. We're going to put new ATF in. This vehicle for power steering takes Deck 6. So what we're gonna do next is I'm gonna have a partner start the vehicle for me and I'm gonna monitor the fluid. I'm gonna be adding fluid while he's doing that and the fluid's gonna be coming out there. And at one point I'll have him turn the steering wheel back and forth and then we will shut the car off before all the fluid comes out. Okay, start it up and turn the wheel back and forth. All right, shut it off. It's that quick. All right, so when we're pouring the fluid in here, it's getting sucked into the power steering pump, and then it's going through the steering rack, going through all the lines, and then coming up here and going into our bucket. And that's how you get a lot of the air out and a lot of the dirty fluid. Take that out. We can pop this off down here. Some of the fluid's gonna come out. Now, with my finger on the cap of this, I'm gonna pop my, my plug off real quick and then push this on real quick. Just like that. Slide it over. And pull my rag out. So there's still fluid in my funnel. I'm gonna have our helper start the car and we'll just run the steering wheel back and forth. All right, go ahead, start it up. Okay, there is still fluid in my funnel. I'm gonna pull it up quick and put my finger over the end, hopefully not lose too much fluid. Let's see. The fluid's up to the top. I am gonna have to suck some of that out. So I'm gonna suck some of the fluid out with this pump. Stick this in here. Okay, it's right up at the top. And that's where we want it right now for when we're gonna let it run for a little bit. We'll leave the cap off for now while we let it run. All right, we're gonna start it up. We're gonna let it run for about 5 minutes like that. So after the engine's been running for about 5 minutes, then we're gonna get in it with the wheels off the ground a little bit and turn the wheels back and forth. Not staying on the stop for too long, just hitting the end and then coming back. And we'll do that a couple times, maybe about 5 to 10 times total. And then we're gonna leave the steering wheel straight. And then we'll shut it off. So at this point, we're gonna check our fluid level. I'm just gonna top it off just a little bit. I just want it closer to the max line. At this point, you would take the car for a ride, drive it for about 5 to 10 minutes, come back and you would check the fluid level again and adjust accordingly. All right, so pull the oil cap off, put the engine cover back on, push it down, put the fill cap back on.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.